What do I look like to you? Probably a typical college student. Big clunky shoes, some pink left in my hair, the works. But my friends might say I'm a superhero. Vague predictor of changes in the weather with my super-powered weather sensor, joint pain. Because without knowing me, you wouldn't know that. You can't just see that I'm disabled. I have an autoimmune arthritis that thinks all of my joints are the enemy, and a hypermobility disorder so that all those same joints are just a little bit too loose. It's a perfect recipe for chronic pain and joint instability. But through living in this body, through finding disability communities online, and through my experience in design school, I've found myself devoted to the spaces where design and disability interact. There's a few ways that this can happen. Design either ignores the scope of disability altogether, is made specifically for it, or falls into the category of universal design. Universal design is sort of a buzzword in the design world. It refers to something that, supposedly, can be used by anyone who might want or need to use it. Universal design is where the bar is set for design right now. But whenever you put a cap like that onto a field like this, you're ignoring the space above it. The space where designs aren't just made for those of us with disabilities. They're made with us, or even better, by us. When I say design, a lot of you probably think that I'm referring to something created by a real designer, a specialist in one of the official design fields, like graphic design, or interior design, or architecture, or fashion. But design doesn't have to be so exclusive when you consider the reality of what that word can mean. When I say it today, I mean design as an object, a space, an interface, or any other kind of interaction that is man-made, regardless of who created it. So a tree is not design, obviously, but purposeful planting of a tree can be, from true landscape design to just planting some trees by your office building for a little bit more shade. Design is simply any created experience. So whether your field is computer programming, or event planning, or sales, or even things like politics, you are creating experiences in one way or another. But if your process towards creating those experiences doesn't include disabled expertise, there's no way that it'll be accessible. Think of it like buying clothes for somebody else. It's hard to buy someone else's clothes. Even if you know their size and what brands they like, you can never be sure that they're going to like what you've gotten unless they come with you. Imagine it's your birthday. Your 5 closest friends and relatives have all decided to buy you sweaters, all of them, and they're all horrible. The first one is bright, hot pink, it's sparkly, there are clashing green stripes, there's a unicorn on it. The next one is the ugliest attempt at a brownish color that you've ever seen. The next one is way too small, and the next one is intolerably itchy, and the last one is so stiff you can't even get your head through. Some birthday, right? Everything or space or interaction that you face throughout a day is a sweater. If you're abled, which means not disabled, then the sweaters that you get throughout a day are pretty okay, and they fit well enough that you don't really notice them. But a day full of those same interactions when you're disabled is more like that horrible birthday you just had. The only ramp being the service entrance in the back is a sweater 3 sizes too small. Another video with no captions is another itchy sweater. Standing room only is another sweater in that disgusting brown. Universal design is already a shaky concept. Often the things that make something accessible to one person make it less accessible to another. But attempts at universal design can become more successful when we include those disabled perspectives, and if they don't, they're just going to fail right off the bat. For example, the stramp. This combination of stairs and a ramp is a feature in plenty of outdoor spaces across the world. It seems, on first glance, like it might be pretty good, and it's often used as a shining example of universal design. But if you consider the dangers of this thing, it's pretty bad. The ramps are super narrow with tiny landings for making 180-degree turns if you're in a wheelchair. And there's no railings to keep your chair on that ramp or to keep people from just stepping right out in front of you. If for blind or low vision users, as well as any with balance disorders, the stairs suddenly leveling out to a ramp in the middle can be super dangerous. And these things in turn make this dangerous for even the most abled pedestrians. That's like a sweater that does absolutely nothing to keep you warm. But a good sweater giver is Hansel Baumann, the university architect at Gallaudet University. Gallaudet is the deaf and hard of hearing university in Washington, D.C. And although Baumann is a hearing architect, he's taken full advantage of the expertise of Gallaudet students. Over the course of 5 years, working with the ASL Deaf Studies program, the Deaf Space project was born. The result is a resource. It's a database of all the most important elements of a space for deaf and hard of hearing students, and it's been implemented across the campus ever since. From open sight lines for communication, to wider hallways for space to sign, to all kinds of other features that us hearing folks might never even think of, the Deaf Space guidelines are useful for any architects, interior designers, event planners, and more who want to make sure that their spaces are accessible and widely useful. This is revolutionary, but it's revolutionary simply because it hasn't been done before, and it should have. Human biometric studies are done all over, measuring the human body and what it can do. Most of these count disabilities as outliers instead of important figures. But when about 25% of the American population is disabled in one way or another, that just doesn't make sense. Billions upon billions of dollars are spent every year on information that discounts this quarter of the American population, this 81 million people. That's the population of all 13 of these states. So by recognizing the incredible insight and intellect in this group of people who not only live the deaf experience, but study it professionally, Baumann opened a door that should have been open to begin with. In the case of Deaf Space, it seems like an obvious solution to implement these insights in this way. But when it comes to other fields that are more steeped in tradition and unwilling to change, there's nothing we can do about those, right? I'm an industrial design student, which means my education has been primarily focused on product design. And design school can take over your life. All of your energy goes into studio, all of your time goes into studio, and regular all-nighters are just expected. After pushing through this for a couple of years, ignoring constant panic signals from my body, I just couldn't do it anymore. My body came to a screeching halt, and I thought that was it. But then I started thinking, maybe I didn't have to stop doing this just because the standard setup didn't work for me. Maybe I could do things differently and still find my place in design. And maybe my experience through living in this body is just as valuable as the things that I'm learning in design school. So I went straight to my favorite professor to ask her for help. Over a period of a few months, we worked out the changes that I would need to make design school work for me. I worked with another professor to learn a different, smaller style of sketching, since standard industrial design style wants big sweeping lines that use your whole arm. I worked to make my studio experience more of an independent study setup so that I can work at my own pace and in my own way. I found electives that let me find my strengths in design, and I completely changed the way I do work in order to make it more digital and working better for my body. I've been doing more 3D modeling, more digital mock-ups, and I sketch digitally on a small tablet. This allows me to take my work with me wherever I might be, at home, in a waiting room, in a coffee shop, wherever. It lets me work on different parts of things depending on how my body feels that day. and it lets me keep doing what I love regardless of the pain my body might be in. And as for my future, I don't know what I'm doing. But I'm finding myself a little bit more drawn to design research and user experience design. Design research would let me work with people and learn about people and choose the populations that I'm researching. It lets me make sure that the research population is the most diverse range of people possible. User experience design is a little bit more nebulous, but it involves a lot of user research to organize information in a way that makes sense, to create intuitive interaction points like in websites or in software that are useful to both new and old users. Universal design is this all too perfect concept that is almost impossible to achieve. But that end result may be closer to being achieved if we make sure that these industries and fields are as accessible as possible. And it doesn't even take big changes. Digitizing work communications can make things more accessible not only to people like me, but to people with visual, auditory, and social disabilities. Allowing meetings to happen in alternative locations can let you plan for the access needs of everyone involved. And breaking down your own internalized assumptions can let you work with people that you might not otherwise get to experience at all. I've been extremely lucky to have the resources that I do to let me fight my way through. But not everyone does, and it shouldn't have to be a fight. Universal design as an end result may be next to impossible, but a universal process, an inclusive industry, doesn't have to be. Disabled expertise can change the world. We just have to let it. Thank you.